Alright everybody, tonight I'm going to shoot a video that I've been meaning to shoot for a while. I really don't know how to go about shooting this because there's no real particular topic or subject. I keep referring to this tank personality, and it's just kind of abstract idea I have. I don't really know how to wrap words around it too much, so I'm going to attempt to do it now because recently I've been getting a lot of comments and questions that will be answered if I just kind of talk about myself for a little while, and I talk about my experience with keeping fish and a little bit of my history and background, and just again kind of amble my way through a little bit of discussion about it, and that should answer some of these questions. We're going to start by looking at my gourami tank. I'm going to throw some food in there in a minute. We're going to do some more sinking granules. That usually gets a lot of good activity along the bottom. For those of you that are not already very familiar with this tank, on the bottom left we will probably be seeing my striped Raphael. You can actually kind of see his nose poking out a little bit there. I also have a very reclusive red-tail loach. It is, if we're going to see it, it'll be on the bottom and it'll be on the right and it'll be briefly. It seldom comes out. I'm going to actually work on focusing, trying to get some at least video, or if you follow me on Google+, you can follow my Aquarium collection, and I will be posting some photos on there if I ever get some stills or some photos. So let's get feeding this. We can watch some activity while I chat away, and then hopefully that will enlighten you all a little bit about why my tanks look the way they do, why I maintain them the way I do, etc. So this again is just sinking granules. I really like them. They tend to drift and float through the water, so they don't go straight to the bottom, but they also do get to the bottom. So I've had a couple of people making various comments. I often get people ask me why I don't use my RO water, and the one I got most recently, one of my regular viewers and regular commenters mentioned something about this new tank I have. It's a completely blank slate right now, and I was saying how I just don't really know what I want to do with it. And in a nutshell, what they were saying was they'd like to see me do something different because all my tanks basically look the same. And I could tell they felt like they were treading on eggshells and were terribly worried about offending me, and sounding as though they might be insulting my tanks. Squeaker has just joined us, so if you hear any meowing off screen, that's what it's coming from. I don't know if you can see him or not. Let me assure you, no offense was taken at all in any way. I often have the same conversation with friends of mine. I'm fully aware that all of my tanks look the same. But they only all look the same in a certain kind of way. They look the same because they're freshwater, they're planted. I like rocks, I like woodwork, I like a nice lush green tank. But to me, my tanks all look as different and feel as different as my cats do. You know, I might have a couple of American Shorthairs, but they're completely different animals. They have their own personality, they have their own look, and my tanks are the same way. This is one of my earlier tanks right here, and I totally get it. Rocks on the bottom, some woodwork, and some plants. And honestly, I even have most of the same kind of plants in all my tanks. And the reason I have those plants is because they're the plants that I've come to realize work for me and work for my tank personality. It didn't take him long to get comfortable, did it? And when I say my tank personality, that means a lot more than just what I like my tank to look like. It's very obvious that I like my tanks to look nice and lush and green and natural, etc. But I've been keeping fish for about 3 years now. I know a lot of people seem to think I've been doing it for a lifetime, but I've only been keeping fish for a few years now. But I'm very obsessive about things. I think the term OCD gets thrown around way too often. That is really an actual disorder that people suffer from. People that like clean tanks do not necessarily suffer from OCD, and I don't either. But I do get very compulsive about things, and once I got the bug for fish, I just started buying fish and buying tanks and setting stuff up. And I went through so many different incarnations of tanks. I mean, if you saw all the different things I've done over the last couple of years, you'd be astonished. I was just talking to a friend of mine the other day that came over, and he was saying how good the tanks are looking and they're all settling in. And I laughed and I told him, years ago I said I'd get there one day. I'd sort of get it all out of my system and I'd settle in to what I like, and that's what I've done. This is what I've achieved. I've settled into what I like. My tanks all look this way because that suits my tank personality. It suits my maintenance schedule. It suits my lackadaisical attitude. I'm not necessarily really good with keeping track of things. I've been putting off doing maintenance on this tank forever. Well, I say forever. It's been like 4 or 5 days. I've been meaning to get around to doing a water change, but I just keep putting it off and putting it off. And, I've lost fish in the past from doing that. I have an experimental nature. I like to tinker with things. So, all of these things have gone into shaping what my tanks look like and what my communities look like and how they interact and behave. And a lot of it's my personality. I'm a pretty laid back kind of guy. I don't like aggressive tanks or anything like that. You're not going to see a bunch of competition. Again, I can't say enough, and it's pretty obvious that I like the natural look. I like community tanks. I'm not necessarily one for species tanks. I tend to like oddballs, but I've tried nano tanks. I've tried soft water tanks. I did the marine tank. I've gone through all of the, the basic stuff you get at the big chain stores, all the different platies and mollies and, various tetras and stuff like that. And I've killed a lot of fish and I've killed a lot of plants. One thing I'm not willing to do is go out of my way to accommodate plants that require special lighting. I like a lot of wood in my tanks, and that builds the tannins up quickly. If you're going to do that, you got to be on top of your water changes, or the tannins will rob the light from your plants. So if I wanted a carpet of some nice red stuff down on the bottom, I would have to get rid of all those floating plants, and I like my floating plants. And I don't want to have these high maintenance plants. I had somebody ask me today whether I fed or put ferrets or tabs, and I don't do anything. I have the lowest tech tanks you can imagine. This tank doesn't even have the planted substrate. It's just the inert gravel and, quote, sand, which is really like a plastic resin. The inert gravel you get from the big chain pet stores or whatever, that's not really gravel. It's like a really hard, dense foam. This sand, I'm assuming it comes off of a machine, and the dust and little tiny bits and chips get collected, and that gets swept up and called sand at the end of the day. But that's all it is. It's just a hard plastic resin. It's completely inert, so that's doing nothing for my plants in this tank, and yet they still look like that. And it's because I have plants that require little to no care. They're low lighting plants, they're easy to grow, they're rugged and durable, and that suits me just fine. I don't want this to be a fiddly hobby. I want this to be something I can just do and enjoy. And I've learned that. I've learned that by doing the fiddly tanks that I wound up not doing well with, because it just doesn't jive with me. And what I was asked earlier was, could I do a tank that didn't have so many rocks in it? The person was saying that they personally didn't like rocks. And again, I don't take any offense to anything like that. If you don't like rocks, that's fine. You can tell me my rocks suck, you hate them. That's fine. That's your opinion. I love my rocks, and we can all get along just fine by liking what we like and that sort of thing. Don't put rocks in your tank if that's how you feel about them. I empathize with that. I can consider, and actually let's have a look at the tank in question here for a moment. I could consider doing something with only driftwood and planted wood, and I'm actually considering that. I'm thinking about doing something a little different. And I was thinking maybe some Java moss on some driftwood and just having it, really lush and green, but a very different feel from what I'm used to. Again, I just don't know what I want to do with this tank, but whatever it's going to be, you're going to know it's my tank, and it's going to be stocked with the kind of animals that can live under the way I treat animals. Again, I'm real heavy-handed on the feeding. Now, I do have animals that are supposed to be very sensitive to organics in the water. I've got an elephant nose, I've got a black ghost knifefish, I have a lot of loaches. I've got some soft water fish. I've also got really odd water. I've gone over my water plenty of times. I'm not going to get into that now. And that's all sort of part of how it all worked out for me. All of my tanks have the same water. I've worked it out so that knowing who I am, I want, when I come in here and really get started on these water changes, I'll just be in the mood for it, and I'll come in and I'll do it. And first of all, I've got the kind of fish that can tolerate me kind of putting it off for a few more days. If I had discus, they'd all be dead. Because you can't just do that. You can't just ignore them for a few days because you don't feel like getting around to it. So, I'll come in here one day and I'll just put some music on and I'll just get to going, and before you know it, I'll have done 5 water changes in a 4-hour period, and I'll shoot 3 videos, and I'll just have a really fantastic fish day. And then tomorrow I might be in a completely different mood and I won't hardly spend any time down here at all. And that's just how I am, and I know that's how I am, and so that's how my tanks are. I have to have my tanks. I can't have, if you're a discus guy, I can't have your tank. If you're one of these little nano tank guys, great channel, Glenn Hawkins, check his stuff out. He does fantastic tanks, but I would kill his fish. I would kill his tanks if I had them, because I just can't keep tanks like that. They just don't go with who I am as a person. Now, the point I'm making to all of this is not so much to explain to you how I like to keep my fish. And very briefly, I will touch on, if you haven't already teased it out of what I've been hinting around with my RO water. That's why I don't use my RO water. I don't want to have to take a tank and go, okay, well, this tank needs 40% RO water, and then I can use the rest of my tap water. I just want all of my tanks to be tanks that I can dump a bunch of water out and put a bunch of water back in. I don't want to have to worry about whether it's a 10 or a 20% water change. I want to be able to just do a 100% water change as whenever I feel like it. And my water is set up to do that. I have very, very stable pH. I have a very, very stable TDS count. I know what the dissolved solids are. It's an unusually high number. But I'll get into that in another video. But the point again is I've got my whole fish life set up around me and my personality. My water is, even the way I keep my maintenance equipment and my tools and stuff like that. I'm not real fiddly about keeping everything separated. So I have to be willing to accept if I've got cyanobacteria in one of my tanks, it's probably going to be in all of my tanks. And I just need to be able to deal with that and treat it or accept it. I deal with algae and certain levels of, but that's just who I am and how I am. And I'm not going to set up a tank that isn't equipped to deal with that and handle that. And I totally understand if you're new in the hobby and you're learning all of this about yourself. I had I guess I'll call it the benefit of having a whole lot of tanks all of a sudden, and in the first 3 years of keeping fish, I've probably kept more fish than your average person keeps in the first 20 years of keeping fish. I've kept a lot of fish over the last few years. I've killed a lot of fish over the last few years. I've kind of rounded the bend with the killing the fish, and I've gotten a lot better with that over the last 6 or 8 months. I've really kind of settled in, and that's kind of what I'm getting to, is I've sort of settled into my groove here, and I know what I like, and I know how I roll, and I know what my tanks do. I'm very comfortable with my skill set and my level of understanding of my tanks, and I'm not ready to go beyond that yet. I could probably handle the challenge of a discus tank or something like that. It would go against my nature and against my grain, I think. But I think I've got the skill set to handle that. I'm just not willing to do it because I just don't think I would do it well. And if I did, it would soon become a chore, and it would not be something I enjoyed anymore. I never look at water changes as chores. Well, I do, but it's I'm looking at it like a chore tonight, and that's why it's not getting done. When I do the water change, it'll be because I'm grooving on my water change, and I'm really enjoying doing this water change and this tank maintenance. I do things that I enjoy doing, and I do them when I like them, and you can say that's selfish, and that's fine. I'll put my hand up to that. I'm comfortable with who I am as a person, and that's just it. I'm not going to do water changes if I just don't feel like doing a water change tonight. So I need the kind of fish that don't have to have a water change every day. Or if you let it slide for 2 or 3 days, it's not going to kill your fish because your nitrates rose a little bit. I don't keep those kind of fish, and I don't keep those kind of fish deliberately. So when you're thinking about your aquarium and your stock list and what kind of fish you want to keep, think about stuff like that. Think about who you are as a person, and think about what your personality is. What What do you want out of keeping fish? That's something to consider. Do you want your fish tank to be invigorating and energizing? Do you want it, is it going to be on your desk in your office? Or is it going to be in your bedroom where most of the time you're going to be winding down for the evening and you want your tank to be soothing and relaxing? Do you want it to put energy in you, or do you want it to draw energy out of you? If you do it right, you could actually get a tank to do both of those things depending on how you look at it. But again, that's getting into a little more of, your own personal taste and what you want. But those are the kinds of things to think about. You got to think about, don't say, oh yeah, I'm willing to do water changes, every other day on this discus tank. Really think about that. Are you really willing to do that a year from now? Are you still going to be willing to do that every other day or every third day or whatever it's required in your particular case? I know it's easy to say, oh yeah, I would do that because I'd love to keep these fish. But be honest with yourself. Really, are you going to still be wanting to do that a year from now? Are you going to take on too much than you can handle, and are you going to burn yourself out? That's very common. People will. I'm really surprised I didn't, because I pulled the stops out once I discovered I could have more than one tank. I just didn't stop till I got to 16. And after several years, and I kind of guess I have burned out to a sense where I don't want fiddly tanks. I don't want tanks that take special water. I don't want sensitive fish that need constant, critical care. And that's not what I'm into. I just like grooving on my tanks and enjoying them and shooting video of them, talking about my fish. Again, to me, all my tanks have their own feel. They have their own personality. I just love my fish. I love my tanks. I get a lot of people asking me if I'm ever going to do like injected tanks and inject CO2, and are you ever going to? And no, I'm probably not. Like I say, my tanks are as low tech as you can get. And that's not because I don't understand how to do any of this stuff. I actually have a CO2 tank and regulator. I could set up an injected system tomorrow if I felt like it. I'm just not interested in doing that. It's just not my thing. I'm not worried about breeding. I don't want tanks that I gotta, worry about doing this and then separating the parents before the babies get eaten. 2 years ago, yeah, I was into that kind of stuff. It was fun and it was neat and it was new, and I was exploring all aspects of the hobby, and I wanted every kind of fish that was ever, available. I kind of worked that through my system now. I'm to the point where I've got this 40-gallon breeder sitting over there, and a year ago, I just would have gone out and bought some fish to put in it. Now, I'm not even in any hurry to think. I don't even know whether I want to do gravel or sand in it yet. I have no idea what I want to do with that tank. It's just a blank slate sitting there. So I can say that it's probably not going to be anything greatly outside the scope of what my tank personality is. I would assume you all realize that. But I really am going to try to do something a little bit different. Maybe not different in the way you might want it to be different, but at least different for me in the sense that it might be like an oddball tank. Good old friend of mine, Jeff B., the other day was talking about some cool fish, some plecos and some rope fish. Got me thinking about them again. I've always had a soft spot for plecos, and the rope fish have grown on me. So who knows, a 40-gallon tank's not huge, but it's big enough that I've got some stuff to work with. I'm going to use my experience. I'm going to use my honesty with myself when I sit and consider what I want to put in there. And I will certainly listen to any input that anybody wants to give me. Give me your opinion. Throw your 2 cents at me. I don't care. You're not going to hurt my feelings. If I don't like it, I just won't do it, It's certainly not going to hurt to throw it out there. I might say, wow, that's a great idea. I never thought about that. So don't be shy. I definitely want my channel to be a welcoming place. I definitely want it to be a community type atmosphere. I always appreciate your comments and your input. So by all means, feel free. Comment, say hi to other people, etc., etc. So I hope that cleared some things up about why I do my stuff the way I do it. If you got any more questions or whatever, by all means, put them in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to get back to you. And you may even wind up getting a video shot that explains all your answers for you. So thanks again for watching. Sorry if I was a little long-winded on this one. I kind of knew it would be, but appreciate it, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks again.